Chapter 6. He could feel it bubbling beneath the surface, anxious to break free and run rampant. Pupils contracting into razor blades, Naruto watched everyone around him with narrowed eyes, leaning back against the wall just off to the side of the others with his thumbs hooked on the holsters to his trench knives. Bloodlust was heavy in the air and it was causing some unwanted side effects. Just like in Wave Country, he could feel the beginnings of a chakra spike in his body, his nerves set on a hair trigger. After experiencing them so much back then, he'd grown somewhat accustomed to how they felt, letting him know when one was starting to form. Listening for any nearby threats, Naruto let his mind wander a little bit. The chakra spikes had stopped after the fight on the bridge and hadn't happened since. So why now? Could his stress level be a trigger? Or could it be his latent battle lust? His stress level was ruled out almost instantly, just being in the village stressed him out. He never knew when he'd be attacked or provoked by the villagers, leaving him slightly paranoid despite his inaction against them. It had to be his battle lust, something he'd developed after that pale-skinned freak fucked with his DNA. He'd been 5 when he'd been taken prisoner and now, 11 years later, what had originally just a somewhat violent short temper had turned into something a little worse. But he could control it, to a degree. He couldn't summon it on command, but it always came at the most crucial of times. Even though it seemed to activate at random, Naruto had figured it out. It wasn't random. He could only deduce that it was the Kyuubi's doing, amplifying him with its chakra whenever he was in a fight with shinobi stronger than him, almost as if it could sense and gauge their level of power. The only chakra spike that hadn't followed those same rules had been the one that happened when he was fighting Haku. That time, he triggered it himself, so it definitely had a secondary trigger tied into his emotions, but it wasn't as controlled. If it's already starting to act up, that means there are some pretty strong opponents here. Naruto mused with a slight frown, his eyes scanning the crowded room. I'll have to be careful. If it spikes during a fight, I'll know to fight them seriously, but I'm not taking any chances. Be smart about this, Naruto. Conserve your chakra whenever possible and don't waste your energy on pointless things. How about Uzumaki Naruto? He heard someone inquire, their tone edged with aggression. Eyes locking onto the source, he saw Inuzuka Kiba glaring at him as he conversed with a strangely familiar-smelling teen with silver hair and glasses. The bloodlust and mingling myriad of scents made it difficult to pinpoint it specifically, but Naruto had a gut feeling that he knew the weird boy. Pushing off the wall and approaching the group, Naruto kept his eyes locked on the canine-like teen. They'd always been at odds since he first joined the academy. Like most of his other haters, Kiba had had a grudge against him for the past 9 years because of his fox-like appearance and scent. Let's see. Uzumaki Naruto, member of Team 7 under Hatake Kakashi. Kabuto began, looking over the Tanin info card in his hand. Mission history, 8 D ranks and 1 C rank. His taijutsu is high, but not much is known about his skills in ninjutsu and genjutsu, although he does favor the Kage Bunshin technique on Akashin. He's extremely skilled with kunai and a pair of trench knives he uses. There's a note here saying that he'd been kidnapped as a child and experimented on by Dash. That's enough of that. Naruto snarled, a kunai piercing the card on him and ripping it out of Kabuto's hand, staking it to the ground. A second later, the card was engulfed in a puff of smoke, the information destroyed. Kabuto narrowed his eyes ever so slightly at it. The only way to destroy the information was for chakra other than his own to go through it, precaution he'd added to them. That meant Naruto had put chakra into his kunai when he threw it, but why? Did he know? Did he recognize him? There are some things that shouldn't be dug up. Speaking of which, Kabuto wasn't able to react in time before Naruto wrapped a hand around the older teen's throat, lifting him off the ground until his feet were no longer touching the floor. Kabuto gripped Naruto's wrist as he glared down at the boy, only to notice the burning red eyes glaring back at him. Lightly pressing the tip of another kunai against Kabuto's cheek, Naruto narrowed his eyes even more with a snarl. How did you come across that information? He growled quietly, ignoring the startled looks from his old classmates. That had been highly classified by the Hokage 10 years ago. So, how? Stand down, Uzumaki. Someone suddenly roared from the front of the room, appearing in a large cloud of smoke as nearly 24 Konoha shinobi appeared via Shunshin simultaneously. Naruto glared at the speaker out of the corner of his eye as they shifted back to blue, his ears pinned back, but he reluctantly let Kabuto stand on his own and retracted his kunai. Standing at the front of the group was a man many feared, Marino Ibiki, head of Konoha's torture and interrogation department. Keep it up and you'll be disqualified. Whatever you say, Scarface. Naruto snarled quietly as he stepped away from Kabuto, sheathing the 2 kunai he'd drawn. His clawed fingers flexed as he itched to draw his trench knives, wanting to know where Kabuto had learned about his past and why he seemed so insufferably familiar. Other than that, he did his best to ignore some of the looks his old classmates were giving him, most of them already biased against him like Kiba. And most of the village. However, he could still sense a couple of them second-guessing their opinions of him as they drew up their own conclusions about his past. Alright, listen up, all of you. From this point on, there will be no fighting without the permission of the examiner. Even if permission is granted, killing your opponent will not be tolerated. Ibiki informed, speaking loud enough for everyone to hear him just fine. The swine that disobey me will be failed immediately. Am I understood? After a few seconds of silence, Ibiki smirked sadistically, unnerving a couple of the less experienced genin present. Good. We will now start the first test of the Chunin exams. Instead of your current seating arrangements, you will be collecting one of these numbered tabs. Ibiki instructed, holding up one such tab to his audience. And sit in the seat assigned to you. After everyone is seated, we will then hand out the exams. A paper test. Naruto thought irritably with a quiet growl. Just fucking wonderful. XXX. It sure is boring without my team. Kakashi sighed out as he leaned back into the couch, an arm draped over the edge as he stared up at the ceiling with a half-lidded eye. Ashing his cigarette, Asuma chuckled slightly at the man's complaint. Don't worry, Kakashi. You'll be busy again soon. The Sarutobi reassured with a smirk. I heard that the examiner for the first test is Marino Ibiki. Kakashi grunted out quietly without taking his eyes off the ceiling, confusing Asuma and Kurenai as they waited in the Jounin lounge. That sadist might scare the hell out of the others, but my team will be fine. They doesn't scare so easy. Sadist? Kurenai parroted curiously. The man's a pro. Asuma answered as he took a drag of his death stick. A pro. She repeated once more, looking at Asuma with a slightly narrowed gaze. She was a little irritated by the useless answer. A pro of what? Torture and interrogation. Asuma responded with a smirk, startling Kurenai slightly as she worried for her team. XXX. To the 78 who remain. Ibiki began, raising his voice simply to instill just a tad bit more fear into the genin in front of him for his personal enjoyment before smirking. Congratulations on passing the first test. Wait, what do you mean? We already pass. Sakura was the first to speak up, most of the people in the room shocked and confused by the revelation. What about the 10th question? Leaning back in his chair, Naruto kept his arms crossed over his chest, scarf pulled up and ears perpetually pinned back as he narrowed his eyes at the man. He'd struggled through half of the test, managing to answer a couple on his own without too much of an issue before being forced into cheating for the rest, which hadn't been easy. His hearing was good, but he had to focus hard to properly time the sound of someone's pencil with their strokes to essentially guesstimate what they were writing. Even still, half of the answers he acquired that way turned out to be just gibberish from his mistakes, leaving his test incomplete. Luckily, he managed to call the man's bluff by betting everything on the 10th question. There was never a 10th question. Ibiki answered with a grin that uneased a few people, Even a couple of the proctors assisting him, Ibiki was not a man known for having a nice or friendly smile. Or rather, you could say that the two choices you had to make were the 10th question. What? Then what were the first 9 questions were for? Demanded the blonde fan-wielding girl he'd seen with the Suna puppeteer yesterday. Even before Ibiki answered, Naruto figured it out, closing his eyes for a moment. Information gathering. They were pointless then. But they weren't. They had already served their intended purpose. Ibiki answered somewhat casually, further confusing most of the genin present. That was when he gained a rather sadistic look in his eyes, his grin shifting to a more purposefully frightening look. They were to test your individual information gathering skills. That was their purpose. Tuning out the man's explanation, Naruto felt the beginnings of another chakra spike coming on, but managed to suppress it with some effort. They were getting more frequent. Why, though? He wasn't in combat, he wasn't getting stressed by anything, and while there were still strong potential opponents around him, there was no bloodlust in the air at the moment. Idly wishing he could actually speak with the Kyuubi at the moment, Naruto figured he'd be able to get answers from the beast itself, but it wasn't to be. He couldn't establish contact through meditation, the only method he had figured would work. So, how would he manage it? Was he stuck trying to solve the mystery of the chakra spikes by himself? Not exactly a foreign concept for him, Naruto grimaced slightly regardless. As much as he liked a challenge, the chakra spikes were a challenge outside of his capabilities. He'd already discarded the theory of them being the Kyuubi attempting to break free. The Sandaime had explained to him a long time ago that the seal had been put into place by the Shinigami itself by the Yondaime and was designed to bind their souls together. If he died, so would the Kyuubi, and if the fox tried forcing its way out, it would kill him in the process, thus ending both of their lives. Even if the fox would just reform after a few years. At that point, was it trying to do something to him? If so, what? Apart from spikes in his aggression, chakra, strength, and speed, he hadn't noticed anything different. It was starting to grate on his nerves. Scratching at his head slightly out of irritation, Naruto decided to think about it later when he wasn't busy. You have all made it through the entrance. The first test of the Chunin selection exam is now over. Ibiki stated with a touch of pride on his face. I wish you guys luck. Faye, nice speech, Scarface. Did you need help writing it? Naruto grumbled sarcastically, ignoring the fact that he hadn't even listened to any of it. Eyeing him, Ibiki smirked slightly. While the other proctors hadn't noticed the boy when he was cheating, Ibiki had. With only his hearing to aid him, he managed rather decently. Despite having never met before, Ibiki had been one of the very few shinobi in Konoha that kept close tabs on the boy. Originally, it had been a precaution, just in case the boy's loyalty had shifted over to Orochimaru's side when he'd been rescued. As time went by and his name had been cleared, Ibiki had taken a minor interest in the fox boy. While his academy grades had suffered, Naruto was far more intelligent than many gave him credit for. Keeping tabs on the kid had proven worthwhile. It had shed light on the corruption taking place in the academy, corruption within the civilian council, and even in certain parts of the ANBU. Most of it had been tied to misplaced hatred towards him, but some of those that had been brought to him were proven to have committed treason in various ways. Before anything else could be said or done, a dark bundle suddenly crashed through one of the windows, only to unfurl and reveal itself to be a banner staked to the ceiling with a pair of kunai, a woman standing in front of it. As she made her entrance, Ibiki frowned tiredly from behind the banner. His second-in-command was a very strange individual. This is no time to be celebrating, brats. I am the examiner for the second test. She shouted. Mitarashi Anko. Now, let's go. Follow me. You have poor timing. Ibiki grumbled as he stepped around the banner, but his remark went unheard by the purple-haired woman as she quickly counted the remaining genin in the room. 78. You let 26 teams pass. Anko growled out at Ibiki. The test was too easy this time. No, there just happened to more outstanding candidates this year. Ibiki corrected with a slight smirk, but once more, it did nothing to change Anko's attitude. Bah, whatever. Anko muttered. I'll be sure to cut them in half in the second test. Must you always yell? Naruto growled at her, picking at one of his ears in an effort to ease the discomfort. There's no need to shout all the time. Oh, did I hurt your ears, pup? Anko asked tauntingly, only making Naruto's eyes narrow, the foxboy oblivious to how they flashed red for a split second. It only made Anko grin rather viciously. Ah, I'm getting excited. I'll explain everything once we change locations. Follow me. Faye. Naruto scoffed as the woman jumped back out the window before standing up himself to follow after her. Fucking psycho lady. Minutes later, once the room had been cleared, Ibiki was gathering up the test sheets when he ran across Naruto's. Half of the answers were filed in, correctly, while the other half was left blank. However, scribbled in a corner of the page was a clawed paw-like hand, giving the middle finger. Sighing heavily, Ibiki added it to the stack he had. XXX. So. That's what a futon technique can do. Naruto growled out quietly as he got back to his feet, having been thrown a so far unknown distance by a powerful gust of wind. First, they get attacked by that genin that tried waiting to ambush one of them before he tracked him down and chased him off. Now this? Catching wind of the distinct stench of snake, Naruto glared off to the side to find the largest serpent he'd ever encountered, but it did little to scare him. He was too pissed off to care about its size. I hate snakes. Drawing a kunai, Naruto glared at it while concentrating for a moment, channeling his chakra into it while doing his best to imbue it with his wind affinity. Flicking his hand and sending the blade flying, Naruto watched as it pierced straight through the snake's head, killing it instantly, before going through the branch behind it. Snorting softly, Naruto tugged his scarf up over his nose while taking off in the direction he'd come from. While it wasn't perfect, he was satisfied with the potential of his wind chakra. He'll have to focus on it after the exams. Nearing where he could smell his team, though, Naruto suddenly caught wind of a scent he hadn't smelled for a long time. One that made his eyes widen in shock and old fear, one that made his blood boil like lava in his veins, one that triggered a chakra spike as the same intensity as the fight on the bridge in Wave Country. Prey should always be trying to run away. The strange Kusa genin nearly hissed as he stood from the corpse of a large snake he'd been inhabiting. In the presence of a predator, that is. Surging forward and spiraling around the tree limbs between him and Sasuke like a serpent himself, the Kusa genin was suddenly forced to stop halfway as a handful of chakra-imbued kunai punched through the branches in front of him, destroying his original path towards his chosen prey. Everyone looked up to find Naruto crouched down on a branch on all fours, his eyes blood-red and fur ruffled, his tail flicking with pure anger. Sasuke. Get Sakura out of here. Naruto snarled from his perch, his gaze locked directly onto the Kusa genin. I have unfinished business with him. Naruto, don't play the hero. He's on an entirely different level than anyone we've ever faced before. Sasuke yelled back, but his words weren't reaching the fox boy like he wanted to. Naruto threw a kunai down near him, the chakra-imbued dagger punching through the wood just a couple feet away from the Uchiha. I said. Run! Naruto roared out as he sprung from the branch, his crimson claw blades extending and silver trench knives in hand, each one faintly glowing with his partially wind-imbued chakra as he rocketed towards the Kusa shinobi. Smirking with bloodthirst, the Kusanine simply stared at Naruto before the fox teen slammed into him, the area around them being destroyed in an explosion of mulched wood and sawdust instantly upon impact. Shit! What the hell has gotten into him? Sasuke snarled as he landed on another branch with Sakura, watching as the multicolored blur that was Naruto chased down the speeding snake-like genin they'd been ambushed by. He's going berserk. A little shocked by the boy's speed, the Kusa Genin was actually being forced to backpedal as fast as he could, dodging and weaving the destructive swipes of his chakra-infused claw blades. Darting through the branches in random directions, the Kusa Genin lost sight of the boy for only a split second as a large tree branch fell between them, forcing Naruto to simply burst through it in his rampage. The Kusa Genin grinned as Naruto sped after him, only for his eyes to widen with surprise as a second appeared directly next to him, having come from a different angle while rapidly spinning through the air. He's fast. The Kusa Genin thought to himself just before impact, the second fox boy having become a whirling drill of blades that cut him to shreds, only to be revealed that he'd been a clone. One made with mud that got splattered all around the area by the attack. Snarling as he landed heavily on another branch, his eyes darting up as the Kusa Genin descended upon from above. Bolting to the side with a single mighty shove to dodge them, Naruto kicked off a tree hard enough to cave in part of the trunk before slamming back into them. Once more, they proved to be a mud clone. He wouldn't behave like this without a reason, Sasuke. Sakura explained, the pair watching as their teammate battled it out with their ambusher. I don't know how he got so strong and I don't care. Right now, I hate to say it, but I think we should listen to him and run. No. Sasuke snapped, shrugging off Sakura's hand when she tried to grab his arm to pull him along. Glaring down at the two from where they were, a strange sense of déjà vu coming over him. Was this the reason why Naruto never talked about what happened on the bridge? Was this the same kind of feeling Naruto had back in Wave Country when he thought he'd be killed? Clenching his teeth, Sasuke lost sight of them for a split second, only to look up at a sound just in time to find the gaping maw of a giant snake lunging at them. That is, until a familiar blur slammed into the snake's nose, stopping it completely just as its fang lodged into the thick tree branch the two were standing on. I told you, to run. Naruto snarled through gnashed fangs, an almost crazed, yet lucid look in his scarlet eyes as he glared up at Sasuke. Eyes going wide as he felt a freakishly long tongue wrap around his body, Naruto kicked his legs up, bracing his feet against Sasuke's and Sakura's chest before kicking them off the branch, launching them further away. Get out of here. My, Naruto-kun, I never thought you'd become such a self-sacrificial hero. The Kusa Genin taunted, somehow managing to speak perfectly fine around his own tongue as he suspended Naruto in the air directly in front of him with it. Snarling like something akin to a rabid animal, Naruto struggled to break free from the man's hold on him. Still, I'm surprised to see you've grown so strong, for a failed experiment. Disguised as the Kusa Genin, Orochimaru couldn't help smirking humorlessly. He'd tried putting a cursed seal on the boy when he'd first captured him, but it malfunctioned for some reason. He deduced that it had been because of the Kyuubi's presence, but he never could figure out why exactly. Either way, it had immediately ruined his plans for the boy once it had turned him into a humanoid fox. Thus, he simply left the boy imprisoned under his care, but he still performed a few simple experiments on him to learn as much as he could about the boy's new physiology. By the time Konoha had discovered the lab and raided it, however, Orochimaru had already been long gone. I'll kill you. Naruto hissed through his gnashed teeth, only growing angrier. And stronger, something that started to worry the traitorous member of the Sannin. Before he could seal away the Kyuubi's power, however, Orochimaru watched with bewildered eyes as he watched a second tail start to sprout from the base of the boy's spine right beside his original one. Snapping back into focus as it finished, Orochimaru tightened his hold on Naruto while drawing a hand back, his fingertips burning with purple flames. Gogyu Fuin. Orochimaru snarled before slamming his hand into Naruto's stomach where the original seal was located, hidden beneath his dense fur. Screaming in pain, Naruto's eyes went wide, his vision gradually going dark from the pain and from his strength being drained from him. Finally blacking out and hanging limply, Orochimaru eyed the unconscious fox child with mild shock and intrigue. Could they be fusing together? Or was it some kind of side effect from the malfunctioning cursed seal? The second was more likely. the cursed seal he'd used having been an experimental prototype that he had scrapped because of its failure upon first use. "Stupid boy, you really thought you could kill me, didn't you?" Without another thought, Orochimaru threw him to the side, causing the boy to slam into a massive tree trunk not that far away before falling a good 10 feet to a branch below. Turning his attention back towards Sasuke, Orochimaru grinned. He was going to have fun testing the boy, his second-stage Sharingan eyes glaring up at him from his spot further down below. Chapter 7. Alright, Sakura. Time to get to work. The Pinkette told herself as she finished making sure Sasuke's condition was still stable, having already placed a number of precautionary traps around the area, her ungloved hands and face smeared with a little bit of dirt. After Orochimaru bit Sasuke and put some weird mark on his shoulder, Sakura, after an admittedly embarrassing fit of hysterical crying and panic, managed to move both of her teammates to another location. Currently holed up amongst the thick exposed roots of a tree, she had addressed Sasuke's condition first due to its severity, high fever, abnormally high heart rate, and obvious signs of being in pain, if the unconscious groans were anything to go by. Naruto, on the other hand, was comatose. It was almost as if he were simply sleeping. No fever, no issues with his heart rate or breathing, nothing. Just, unconscious. Rummaging through her equipment pouches, she retrieved the small assortment of medicinal herbs she kept on her at all times. If they pulled through and managed to survive the exams, she would have to make sure she thanked Haku for the lessons. It just might be the one thing that saves their lives at the moment. Pulling out her pestle and mortar, Sakura took small pieces of different herbs and placed them in the mortar before starting to grind them down as fine as she could with the pestle, just like Haku had taught her. One herb had been for Sasuke's fever and another to help ease his pain. She couldn't do much about his heart rate, however, apart from a very mild sedative. She had to be careful, though. If she messed up the dosage for each one, they could have deadly side effects. The last thing she ever wanted to do was accidentally kill one of her teammates. Retrieving a small water bottle she kept on her at all times, she poured it into the little pot she had unsealed earlier before setting it on the small fire burning nearby. Once she was done grinding the herbs down, the water had finished heating up just enough, hot, but nowhere close to boiling. Pouring it back into the bottle, she added in the powdered herbs and closed the lid, shaking the bottle to better mix it up. Shifting her position so that Sasuke's head was resting in her lap, she opened the bottle and slowly poured a little bit into Sasuke's mouth. Fortunately, he swallowed reflexively. Thank goodness. Haku-san hasn't taught me how to force-feed someone herbal medicine yet for emergency situations. Sakura thought with a sigh of relief, only to return to the task at hand. She had maybe an hour of sunlight left before the first night of the second test would begin. With both of her teammates out of commission, she'll have to stay awake and keep watch all night and into the day until one of them woke up. After making sure Sasuke drank at least half of the hastily made medicinal tea, she set it aside before readying another water bottle. Only this time, it was something for herself. She would need something to help keep her awake later on. Thankfully, Haku had given her a small supply of already ground up and blended herbs for just such an occasion. I definitely have to thank her now, but first, I have to make sure we survive long enough to do it. Taking another sip of her energizing herbal tea, Sakura immediately grimaced at the foul taste just like every other time she'd taken a sip each hour. A couple seconds later, however, she had to take a deep breath as a slight shiver ran up her spine. Haku had said the herbs used were rather strong and that one small bottle should last her a good 12 hours or so. She'd waited until she started getting too tired to keep her eyes open before she started drinking it, which she guessed to have been around 3 or 4 in the morning. Even as the sun started coming up, Sakura didn't feel the slightest bit exhausted, but she'd have to make sure she either made the tea last or one of the boys woke up before she ran out. She'll be left drained after the herb's energizing effects wear off. Hearing a noise off to the side, however, she reflexively threw a senbon at the source, startling the squirrel she'd heard. Heaving a sigh, she looked at the bottle. It definitely made her a little jumpy, but that's exactly what she needed at the moment. Checking Sasuke's fever, she smiled faintly upon noticing that it had gone down slightly. Not by much, but it was enough to show that he was starting to get better. Unfortunately, she didn't have anything to gauge Naruto with. She would just have to wait until he woke up. Taking a moment to use the remnants of her third and final water bottle, Sakura poured some water on the rag she'd had on Sasuke's head before placing it back on the Uchiha's forehead. "Heh, up all night?" Someone asked mockingly from behind her, making Sakura's head snap in their direction, only to see a trio of genin that wore a hitayate with a musical note engraved on it. She faintly remembered Kabuto saying something about Otogekure having only one team in the exams. The girl looked unassuming, for the most part, while her two male comrades were a little more menacing, the bandaged and hunched over one with what looked like shag carpeting on his back being the most intimidating in appearance. "Regardless, wake up Sasuke-kun. We want to fight him. You're with that freaky bastard, Orochimaru, aren't you?" Sakura questioned, her tone turning surprisingly cold as she stood up, stepping out to the edge of the haven of tree roots as she readied a handful on Senbon with one hand and a kunai with the other in a reverse grip. Eyes narrowing as she scowled, Sakura tilted her head slightly. This time, it the Oto Genin's turn to hesitate, mildly intimidated by the seemingly weak-looking girl's dark change in personality. "I know he's the one pulling the strings. What did he do to Sasuke-kun? What is that weird mark on his neck? Answer me quickly before you really make me mad." Just what was he thinking? Dosu muttered to himself, his own head tilting slightly. The other male simply grinned viciously. "Hearing that, we're just going to have to kill you, now won't we? You know too much." Zaku remarked threateningly before cracking his knuckles. "I've got this one. I'll kill her first and then I'm killing that Sasuke kid." "Wait, Zaku." Dosu spoke up as he took a step forward before crouching down. "You're not very good, a recently overturned stone, differently colored dirt. Grass doesn't grow here, a booby trap is useless unless it goes unnoticed." Sakura stayed silent as she continued to stare at them coldly. "Kill her," Dosu ordered. Immediately, all three jumped towards over, clearing the trap they'd discovered. Smirking faintly, Sakura cut the wire to a second trap with her kunai that had been run along the route beside her. Instantly, a massive log that was easily 20 feet in diameter came swinging down from above, all three caught in its path. Extending his gauntlet right hand, Dosu didn't flinch nor did his teammates as the log exploded from some unseen force, only for their eyes to widen when they saw Sakura's Senbon already in flight to intercept them. "Senbon Kage Bunshin." The pinkette uttered just as coldly as before, forming a half-seal with her empty hand, causing the three metal Senbon to turn into 30. Raising their arms defensively to shield their most vital spots, all three Oto Genin were pelted with the metal-throwing needles, but it did little to hinder them. Sakura knew that, having used them as a distraction. Throwing her kunai, she performed two more hand seals. Kunai Kage Bunshin, Katsu. Exploding tags. Dosu thought to himself as he saw the dozen kunai flying towards them, the exploding tags wrapped around their handles catching fire before detonating as they reached the still airborne Oto Genin. While only scratched up and a little charred, the three Otonin were still knocked back by the explosion, sending them flying straight into another trap she'd set earlier. Feeling wires snap as they flew into them, the three Otonin weren't prepared for the hailstorm of kunai launched at them from all angles while they were still heading straight for the ground. "Zankuha!" Zaku roared as he held his hands out to either side of him, aiming his hands just right so as not to hit his teammates. Instantly, explosive gusts of wind burst forth from his palms to blow away a large majority of the kunai flying towards them, giving them the ability to land on their feet with only Kin taking a single kunai to her left thigh. "TCH. Cheeky bitch. Good. You're not dead," Sakura remarked while cracking her gloved knuckles, a slight twitch forming under her left eye. Ever since Wave Country, she'd been working on something of her own with a bit of help from Haku. Although still of a sound mind and relatively sane, Sakura had always had a slight split personality since she was kid, her inner self, in a manner of speaking. While on its own, it was slightly crazed and not all that capable of forethought, Sakura had been trying different ways of blending her two halves together. Even Haku had admitted that once she had figured out how to do it last month, Sakura became a terrifying strategist due to her high intelligence and resourcefulness. Combined with her recently increasing physical might, she was nothing short of a monster in a fight. A young and so far inexperienced monster, but a monster nonetheless. She liked to call it Shinri Kuro. Let's have some fun, shall we? Drawing a kunai with one hand, Sakura threw it at the trap they'd found earlier, something she had actually done on purpose, while the three Oto genin tried rushing her again. As it hit the ground moments before the three enemies came within a few meters of it, she promptly yanked on the nearly invisible thread attached to it, triggering the trap. Immediately, the ground opened up beneath them, revealing the spike-infested pitfall trap she'd set up yesterday. Unfortunately, Zaku and Dosu avoided it easily enough while Kin lost her footing at the last possible second, resulting in her clinging to the far edge of the trap, only to scream in pain from a sharp wooden spike going through her right foot. TCH. Fucking tricky little bitch. Zaku snarled as he rushed forward, preparing his Zankuha again. Flicking another kunai to her side, Sakura cut another wire, causing two more massive logs to come in from either side of the attacking ninja. Eyes going wide, Zaku threw his hands out to the sides again to either destroy or at least stop the logs with his attack. He unintentionally left himself wide open. Capitalizing on it, Sakura pumped chakra into her legs to swiftly close the gap, hunkered down slightly with her right fist cocked back. As his strange attacks blasted at the logs, they locked eyes for a split second. Her gaze was cold and calculating, his wide-eyed and panicked. Shinero. The pinkette roared before her fist made contact with the dark-haired Oto genin's chest, the power packed into her punch being enough to solidly crack his sternum and a couple ribs as he was launched backwards, the logs still closing in on them. Jumping up at the last second to avoid them, Sakura watched as Dosu did the same, still charging her. This time, she was the one caught off guard as he lunged for her, unable to properly defend herself at the moment. Konoha Senpu. Came the yell of a third party before a familiar blur of green intercepted the strange Oto genin, launching him back with a punishing spin kick to his midsection. Landing in front of Sakura atop the logs after they collided together, Lee glanced back at her while in his taijutsu stance, flashing her a grin. I'm glad to see that you're unharmed, Sakura-san. Looks like I made it just in time. Shut up and focus, Lee. Sakura growled out, her uncharacteristically cold tone catching him off guard. The fight isn't over yet. Who the hell are you? Dosu snarled as he stood back up, Zaku shakily standing as well as he held his pain-stricken chest with one hand, a thoroughly pissed-off look on his face. Further behind them, Kin had finally dragged herself out of the pit, but she was no longer in any real fighting condition due to her rather seriously injured foot and wounded leg. The beautiful green beast of Konoha, Rock Lee. The spandex-clad taijutsu specialist introduced with a stoic expression as he looked back towards the bandaged one-eyed teen. After a moment, Lee's gaze hardened just a touch more as he knew the pair were still very capable of fighting. I'll take over from here, Sakura-san. Don't even start with the chivalry bullshit. Sakura growled at him coldly. She had used up all of her trap-making resources on the ones she had showcased so far and had none left to rely on, leaving her with no other choice than to fight now. She wasn't the weak little girl she used to be. I've got questions and they've got answers for me. TCH. Troublesome bunch of cockroaches, aren't you? Dosu snarled as he started pulling his right sleeve back again, his lone eye narrowed angrily. As the chaos of the fight died off and everyone started running damage control, Naruto let out a quiet animalistic growl as he started waking up, grimacing as he slowly opened his eyes, only for them to snap open and for him to bolt upright. Unintentionally scaring the hell out of Shikamaru and Chuji, who had been debating on how to wake him up just moments prior. What what happened?" Naruto rasped, his throat a little dry as he held his pounding head. Looking around at the sheer destruction of the area, though, Naruto was absolutely shocked. He'd slept through all of that. Without warning, he was suddenly tackled back to the ground by Sakura. One of the side effects to her Shinri Kuro pseudo technique was being excessively emotional after cancelling it out, in contrast to her relatively emotionless state while using it. "Oh, thank goodness. You're okay," she cried out happily, hugging the fox teen. Growling slightly from the sudden and abrasive embrace, Naruto used his one free hand to try pushing her off, the other pinned to his side because of her, but she refused to let go. "I was worried that you wouldn't wake up." "Get off," he snarled, but not out of hate. He just didn't like people touching him without his permission. Finally letting him go, Sakura looked like she had remembered something before darting off to the haven of roots where her teammates had been resting earlier. Naruto had been moved during the fight to avoid being harmed by one of Zaku's attacks, something the Fox team was oblivious to. Looking at the two members of Team 10, he nodded his head in her direction. "The hell is up with her, and what the fuck happened? You guys are a mess and this place looks like a war zone." "That's kind of a long story." Shikamaru responded a little hesitantly, rubbing the back of his head. As Sakura started heading back towards him, Naruto idly noticed how her ponytail was gone, leaving most of her hair no longer than about chin length, something he quirked an eyebrow at. He wasn't able to voice his confusion about it, however, as a small half-empty bottle of water was all but shoved into his hands. "Here. I'm sorry. I'd been so busy taking care of Sasuke last night that I forgot to take care of you, too," Sakura explained, apologizing as she bowed to him. Eyeing her strangely, Naruto mumbled a quiet thanks under his breath before taking a drink of water. Just what in the world did he miss while he was unconscious? "You guys had quite an eventful morning, huh?" Naruto mumbled offhandedly, but despite how casual the remark sounded, Sasuke and Sakura could tell he was thinking about something from the serious look on his face. After everyone else had left, his teammates had filled him in on what had happened while he had been unconscious, though Sakura had done most of the storytelling since she had been awake the whole time. "And you said those Oto nut jobs left us their Earth Scroll before you guys chased them off?" "Emichim," Sakura responded before frowning slightly. "Except, we don't have our Heaven Scroll anymore." "That'll be a bit of a problem," Naruto muttered quietly, staring off into the distance in thought as he scratched under his chin slightly. Closing his eyes with a slightly huffy sigh, Naruto smoothed out the fur on his neck before tugging his scarf up over his nose and standing up. "Guess that leaves me no choice, you guys stay put. I'm going hunting." "What? Are you crazy? You just dash." Sakura was cut off by Naruto's blank, apathetic stare. "As of right now, I'm the only one that's in top condition, for the most part. You're at your limit, Sakura, and despite the strange power boost Sasuke had earlier, he's still in rough condition," Naruto explained, his tone leaving no room for argument. "Besides, you need to sleep soon. Sasuke can watch over you for a little bit while I'm out. Whether I'm successful or not, I'll be back in 3 hours. No sooner, no later. Got it? Naruto, don't take any unnecessary risks." Sasuke cautioned with his hands clasped contemplatively in front of his face, his eyes just a little colder than they usually were, but it wasn't anything directly relating towards Naruto. "We still don't know what Orochimaru did to you yesterday. What are you? My mother now?" Naruto grumbled irritably, only to get Sasuke's cold stare on him. Sighing heavily, he turned to leave, waving over his shoulder dismissively. Yeah. Whatever you say, Mom." Without another word, he leapt up to the nearest low-hanging branch before heading deeper into the woods, tugging his scarf back down in search of a scent trail while his ears perked up, listening for any sign of another genin team in the area. Despite his bravado, Naruto knew something wasn't right. He felt just a little bit weaker than normal and his chakra control seemed off, like he'd suddenly lost all of his progress with it. He felt like he did back when they'd first graduated from the academy. Even his usual speed was suffering from whatever it was the snake bastard had done to him yesterday. Just gonna have to play it smart from here on out until I can get this figured out. He mused with a slight grimace. Back to square one, it is, then. That was when he caught wind of a somewhat familiar scent. One that belonged to someone he'd fought recently. Smirking slightly, Naruto paused for a moment to get the direction the scent went in before following after it. It didn't take him too long to track them down, maybe an hour at most. Staying high above them where they couldn't notice him, Naruto stared down at the three aimed genin, his eyes immediately locking onto the one with both eyes, his two teammates having only their left eye visible for one and the other having both eyes covered. He owed 2 eyes for his name-calling yesterday. However, he patiently waited to see if he could get a glimpse of their scroll. Luckily, he didn't have to wait long, watching as it was passed to another team member, a heaven scroll, just what he needed. He waited until one of them, no eyes, stepped away to take a leak before making his move, changing locations swiftly and silently. Reaching them just as they finished, out of sight of the others, Naruto rushed in quickly before trapping them in a tight headlock, cutting off his airflow and stopping him from trying to call out to his friends. Once he was knocked out, he used a bit of wire to tire them up before dragging them into the bushes. He then waited patiently as they started getting nervous when their teammate didn't come back. Good. The more nervous they were, the better it was for him. Picking up a small pebble, he tossed it into the forest just beyond their resting spot, the two getting jumpy as they readied kunai for a fight. He didn't care what any of them said to one another, none of it was important. He was too busy hunting them. Once again changing location while creating a Kage Bunshin to take up another spot, Naruto waited until the two had put a little bit more distance between each other before signaling his clone, who threw down a handful of smoke bombs around them. Sprinting in, Naruto tracked them via sound before sneaking up on the nearest one, knocking him out almost immediately by kicking him in the head from behind. By the time his body hit the ground, Naruto had already darted off, circling the smoke cloud from the dense brush around them while the last one, 2 eyes, started getting nervous after hearing something fall and getting no response from his second teammate. Unlucky, very, very unlucky. He whispered to himself as the smoke cleared, revealing his knocked-out teammate, Mubi, lying on the ground a few meters away from him. That was when a senbon suddenly stabbed into the back of his leg, making him cry out in pain. Yanking it out, Hyoboro looked at it to see a purplish substance coating the metal shard, poison of some kind. Super unlucky. That you are. Naruto spoke up as he stepped out of hiding, shocking 2 eyes with his appearance. Remember me? The fox freak. I figured I'd pay you guys a little visit, seeing as I'm in need of your scroll at the moment. You dumb bastard. You had a better chance picking me off from the shadows like the others. Oboro growled out a little haughtily before trying to perform hand seals, but, his hands were numb, his fingers fumbling around as he struggled to move them. Paralytic poison. Quite right. I've got a personal rule about killing and I don't feel like breaking it just because someone called me names. Naruto answered casually as he watched Oboro slowly drop to his knees, his eyes wide with fear even as he fell to the ground on his side. Giving the poison a few more seconds to take effect, Naruto signaled for his clone to join him, his doppelganger landing near 2 eyes before rummaging through his pockets for the scroll. Finding it and tossing it to Naruto, the clone dispelled itself while Naruto caught the item. Making sure his scarf was still pulled up over his nose, Naruto smiled at the aimed genin before waving to him, darting back into the canopy without another word. From there, he went straight back to his team with the scroll stashed in his equipment pouch. They had what they needed now. That meant they could head straight for the tower once Sakura finished resting. They were one step closer to finishing the second test, even after all of the hardships they'd been forced to deal with. It didn't take him too long to get back to his teammates, finding Sakura already asleep with Sasuke sitting a few feet away from her with his back to one of the tree roots. As he approached, Sasuke looked up at him before catching the heaven scroll tossed to him. You actually pulled it off. Good. The Uchiha mumbled as Naruto walked over, leaning back against a separate exposed root that stood taller than himself. Now that most of their problems were solved, Sasuke sighed quietly, finally able to relax a little bit. Glancing back over at his Vulpine teammate and rival, he eyed Naruto's twin tails. None of them had talked about them yet. Sakura might be asleep and he'd probably have to relay any information about it to her later, but he was curious, and suspicious. Hey, Naruto, back when you tried to save us from Orochimaru, you grew a second tail just before he knocked you out. Why? Second tail. What dash? Naruto questioned before shoving off the root and looking behind himself. Just as Sasuke eyed, he now had two tails. Almost immediately, he lost his cool, gripping the twin appendages as he glared at the heatedly. What? Son of a bitch. God damn it. Fucking shit. Just what I needed. Another reason for people to hate me in this fucking village. Judging by his reaction, I don't think he knows either. Sasuke mused flatly, continuing to watch Naruto with a blank expression as the Fox team raged about the new addition. Chapter 8. Ha, just my luck. Naruto sighed out as he took a moment to tighten the straps to his bracers and greaves before making sure his kunai harness was secured still. Not long after reaching the tower, they'd been given a couple days to rest and recover until the end of the second test, but because there were still too many people that had passed, they were forced to partake in a preliminary test to further thin the crowd. While he'd struggled a little bit due to the weird mark Orochimaru had put on him, Sasuke had still won his match, but had been taken away by Kakashi shortly after, most likely to do something about the weird mark on his neck. He'd been rather impressed with Sakura's match, too, but Ino had gotten lucky, causing them to knock each other out and remove them both from the exams. He didn't really care enough about the others to pay much attention to their matches apart from observing their fighting styles just in case he had to fight them later on. On the electric scoreboard mounted to the far wall, two names were displayed on the screen, Uzumaki Naruto vs Inuzuka Kiba. Further down the balcony they all stood on. Naruto could hear Kiba's cocky boasting before feral teen hopped down with his canine companion, Akamaru. Huffing slightly, Naruto hopped up slightly to stand on the rail before dropping to the arena floor down below, walking over to his starting position with his thumbs hooked on the holsters to his trench knives. Ready to get put down, Fox? Kiba sneered, putting a hand on Akamaru's head, large breed hip-high canine barking in agreement with his partner. Me and Akamaru are going to rip you apart. You might as well save yourself the pain and forfeit now. Faye. Naruto scoffed slightly as he adjusted his scarlet scarf mask before leveling his icy blue eyes on the Inuzuka with a cold stare. He was going to make Kiba pay for the Fox remark. You can try, Kiba, but you won't succeed. Seventh match, Uzumaki Naruto vs Inuzuka Kiba. The sickly Jounin proctor for the preliminaries proclaimed while raising a hand into the air, only to chop it down after a couple seconds. Begin. Shikaku. Kiba snarled as he crouched down with a hand seal, causing wisps of chakra to rise off of him like steam as his nails became claws and he took on a wilder look. The next instant, he blurred towards Naruto at high speeds, intending to take him out in a single blow. Eyes narrowing, Naruto was far too used to faster opponents like Haku to be caught off guard by the bull rush, simply sidestepping the attack. Eyes going wide, Kiba couldn't stop fast enough to change direction or try to hit him again. Instead, Naruto raised one leg as he passed by and kicked him in the back hard enough to smash Kiba's face into the ground before he bounced up a little bit. Recoiling from the kick, Naruto spun on his heel before kicking Kiba in the ribs hard enough to launch him into the side wall beneath the observer's balcony, cracking the wall slightly from the impact. Good, my strength hasn't suffered too much from the snakefuck seal thing. Naruto mused while flexing one of his hands, his eyes locked onto Kiba as the teen started getting back up, but the slight smirk on his face showed he wasn't done yet. Ear twitching and swiveling around, Naruto waited until the last second before crouching down and rolling backwards, causing Akamaru to fly over his head and miss him. Springing forward immediately after, Naruto drove his elbow into the large canine before the white fur dog could touch the ground, sending him flying directly into Kiba, smashing the Inuzuka back into the wall. "There can be 10 of you and you still won't beat me, Kiba," Naruto coldly explained as he stood up straight, taking his hands away from his trench knives. As hostile as Kiba was, he didn't want to seriously harm the guy. He was pretty sure that if it weren't for his physiology, they could have been pretty good friends. Instead, Kiba was like so many other villagers. Having lost his father to the Kyuubi attack, Kiba directed his pain and anger at Naruto because of his appearance and would probably hate him even more if he knew about the Kyuubi being sealed inside of him. "Your hatred of me blinds you, it makes you sloppy. Your arrogance only makes it all that much worse. Shut up. You don't know a damn thing," Kiba snarled, holding a whining Akamaru in his arms as he stayed where he was on the ground. That blow had cracked a couple of Akamaru's ribs, taking the dog out of the fight. Moving out from under his companion and letting him rest where he was, Kiba ran a hand over his head and along his back. "Don't worry, buddy. I'll make him pay for hurting you." Naruto simply sighed, hearing the feral teen's vow. He didn't like harming animals, but if he hadn't taken Akamaru out of the fight like that, he might have been forced to cause greater harm to him. Walking back out towards the middle of the arena, Kiba kept his eyes on Naruto with a snarl on his face, only to suddenly pop a small pill into his mouth, a soldier pill, from the look and smell of the thing. Naruto narrowed his eyes as Kiba's chakra spiked higher before rushing the fox boy. Halfway to him, Kiba tossed a smoke bomb at Naruto's feet, blinding him with the gray smog. Tsuga. The Inuzuka roared as he threw himself into a spin, becoming a drill of claws that slammed into Naruto's chest, sending him flying back before tumbling across the ground. Grinning viciously, Kiba flexed his claws, waiting. "Like I said, you're going to pay for hurting Akamaru. Is that the best you could do?" Naruto suddenly asked, sounding surprisingly calm as he stood up. His mesh shirt was shredded and the straps to his kunai holster were mangled, blood soaking his fur from the gashes carved into his flesh by Kiba's claws. Even still, Naruto didn't show any signs of feeling pain as he locked eyes with Kiba. Reaching up and simply ripping off the harness, Naruto let it fall to the ground beside him. He rarely used it anymore, anyways. He actually did feel the pain, but after having so many things thrown at him and the battles he'd fought since becoming a genin, he wasn't affected by it. Not only that, but he simply blocked it out, forcing himself not to feel it. "You're going to have to do better than that, Kiba. Who's being arrogant now?" Kiba snarled before rushing Naruto again, throwing himself into another spin. "Tsuga. Not good enough." Naruto mumbled as he narrowed his eyes before pouring his chakra into his hands and arms. Just as Kiba came within a couple feet of him, his hands shot forward and grabbed Kiba by the wrists, stopping his spin instantly, but the force of the impact caused him to slide back a couple feet. Eyes wide, Kiba was shocked that he'd been stopped so effectively, having thought something like that was impossible. Before he could react, though, Naruto yanked his arms out to the sides while pulling Kiba closer, driving his knee into the Inuzuka's stomach. Stunned by the blow, Kiba did his best not to puke, only for Naruto's elbow to slam into his spine between his shoulder blades, a starburst of light to flash across his vision from the pain. Shoving him back up into a standing position with his leg, Naruto hopped up slightly to switch legs before his armored foreleg collided with Kiba's flank, causing a strangled cry of pain to wheeze out from the Inuzuka as his lungs were forcefully empty before he could breathe. Thrown to the side by the kick, Kiba hit the ground, coughing and gagging, gasping for air as he struggled to refill his lungs with precious oxygen. Instead of pressing the advantage, Naruto simply stood there, waiting for Kiba to recover and stand back up. "You, bastard." Kiba coughed out between breaths, glaring up at Naruto from his spot, hunched over and breathing heavily. "How are you this strong? Because I have a reason to keep going, no matter what. Naruto answered softly, but with conviction as his mind wandered to Haku for a moment. That's what I meant when I said that you won't beat me. I wasn't talking about physical strength. I was talking about true strength, the kind of strength you gain when you have something precious to protect. Oh, yeah. And just what are you protecting right now? Kiba demanded while rushing Naruto again, a clawed fist drawn back to swing. Eyes closing for a moment, Naruto ducked slightly and leaned to the side a little bit while cocking back his own fist. Avoiding Kiba's swing, Naruto slipped past the Inuzuka's guard before catching his throat in the crook of his elbow, stopping the boy dead in his tracks with the lariat. Immediately pulling him into a headlock with Kiba's back held to his bloody chest, Naruto didn't waste time, kicking the back of Kiba's knee to drop him down, choking him out as he clawed at his armored forearms, trying desperately to get free. Right now. My honor. Naruto answered softly moments before Kiba lost consciousness. Letting up on the pressure, Naruto gently laid him down on the ground and stepped back while the proctor, Geku Heiate, came over to check the Inuzuka. Winner by knockout, Uzumaki Naruto. The sickly-looking man declared while lifting the arm closest to Naruto, signaling the end of the fight. Sighing quietly as he started walking toward the stairs while a couple medics came out to tend to Kiba, Naruto reached into the equipment pouch along his lower back, retrieving a small jar of ointment, a little gift Haku had given him the morning of the Chunin exams. Smiling fondly, he opened the lid as he started walking back to where his team was, lightly dabbing the healing medical cream along the claw wounds on his chest, tiny wisps of steam rising from them as the ointment reacted with his healing factor, healing him most of the way by the time he reached them. Did you really have to choke him out like that, Naruto? Sakura asked worriedly, both for him and for Kiba. Naruto didn't answer as he leaned back against the wall, tugging his scarf back over his nose with his eyes closed, his hands shoved into his pockets. Even as the next pair of contestants went down to the arena floor, he stayed where he was, his eyes still closed, but halfway listened as the two Hyuga members battled. It didn't take long before he heard the distinct sound of someone coughing up blood, prompting him to open his eyes before stepping forward, leaning on the guard rail slightly as he watched. Eyes narrowing slightly, he watched as the girl, despite her unseen injury, tried to keep fighting. For that, she gained a lot of respect from him. He remembered how nice she'd always been back in the academy, even to him. Hinata had always been a gentle soul. As much potential as she had, she was too kind to hurt anyone. Thus, she was considered weak by many. He could tell just how severely outmatched she was at the moment, her fellow Hyuga being far stronger than her. And far more brutal. Despite her efforts, she was being beaten, knocked back to the floor with blood dripping from her mouth. She keeps getting back up. He mused to himself, ignoring the others around him as his ears pinned themselves back. It was an all too familiar sight for him. For years, he remembered being beaten down not too differently than she was, only to keep getting back up, regardless of how badly injured he was. He couldn't fight back, so he did the next best thing and didn't give in. If they were going to kill him, he wouldn't stop them, but he was going to die on his feet. Not on his knees. That was when, after being knocked to the floor again, Naruto noticed that something had been changing about the girl throughout the match as she struggled to stand back up, looking like she was on death's doorstep. Gripping the rail a little tighter, Naruto saw what had changed and recognized it. It was her eyes. They were filled with the determination to never give up, to keep going, no matter what. She can't win this fight, but she's found her true strength because of it. Niji. The match is over. Heiate called out as Niji rushed to attack Hinata again, only for the gathered Konoha Jounin sensei and the proctor himself to swarm the boy, stopping him just a few feet before he could get to Hinata. Scowling from his spot, Naruto watched as a few medic nin came rushing out to stabilize the girl as she coughed up more blood and fell to the ground. Niji. If it weren't for the fact that he couldn't feel the Kyuubi's chakra anymore, Naruto had no doubt in his mind that he'd be dealing with chakra spikes out of anger, the Hyuga boy's attitude being severely grating on his nerves and trying on his patience. He now had a target to reach in the exams now. It wasn't to win. It wasn't to get promoted. It was to put Niji in his place. The hateful little bastard had gone too far, nearly killing his own family member because of that hatred. In the end, though, it all came down to whether or not they would fight in the finals. Standing beside him, Sakura looked at the fox teen in mild confusion and growing concern when she heard him growling quietly, his icy blue eyes glaring directly at Niji, who happened to notice and stared right back at Naruto. Unreactive to Niji's sneering expression, Naruto kept his eyes on the boy as he walked away as if nothing had happened, returning to the observer's balcony. He was going to enjoy breaking him. I thought you didn't like going to the hot springs. Haku teased, getting a half-hearted growl of annoyance from Naruto as they walked down the path to the place in question, the ice wielder having taken up her usual place under his arm and leaning into him. Haku only giggled at his growl, thoroughly entertained with tormenting him. I do, and I'm not here for that. I'm looking for someone. Naruto grumbled as they walked around the hot springs area, his eyes glancing around for the person the Sandaime had told him about. After leaving the Forest of Death, he had immediately gone to the Hokage to talk about what Orochimaru had done to him. Despite everything he knew, the Sandaime had been unable to help him with the issue, but he knew someone who could. Good thing he knew them as well. Oh. Who? Haku inquired curiously before Naruto's ear twitched at a sound, his eyes glancing over to the side. The biggest pervert to exist. Naruto sighed out before pulling away from her and walking over to where he'd heard the noise. It had been the perverted giggling of the man he was looking for. Perching himself on a wooden guard-rail behind the man that was peeking through a hole in a fence, Naruto simply waited, knowing the man had noticed his presence. After a few seconds, Jiraiya glanced over his shoulder to shoo off his watcher before his eyes widened slightly. Crouched on the wooden post was someone he knew quite a lot about, Uzumaki Naruto. What are you doing here, Naruto? I thought you hated the hot springs because they make you smell like wet dog. Nice to see you, too. Naruto mumbled irritably under his breath, half-heartedly glaring at the man as he adjusted his scarf mask. Sighing, he stepped off the rail, shoving his hands in his pockets. Look, I don't exactly have time to waste right now, so I'll get straight to the point. Your old teammate put a seal of some kind on me called Gogyo-Fuin. It's messing with my chakra and I need you to get rid of it. Can you help or not? Naruto-kun, who is this? Haku asked as she walked over, glancing between them. Secretly, Naruto was rather glad that his girlfriend didn't have a large rack or else the old lek would be ogling her shamelessly. Oh. Finally got yourself a girl, brat? Jiraiya remarked, grinning at the fox teen, who simply gave him a flat stare. Young lady, I am Dash. This perverted old man is Jiraiya, Konoha's toad sage and one of the Sannin. Naruto introduced, cutting Jiraiya off before he could do his stupid introduction dance thing. He blatantly ignored Jiraiya's indignant pout before sighing, palming his face as well. He's also my godfather, regrettably. Hey! Jiraiya barked out with a glare. Don't go saying that as if you're ashamed to know me, brat. I am a goddamn legend in this world. The ladies love Dash. To kick you in the nuts and beat the shit out of you for spying on them. Naruto interrupted apathetically, something that made Jiraiya pout childishly, he couldn't argue the fact. Looking between the two blankly, Haku couldn't help giggling at how they interacted after a few seconds. Hello, Jiraiya-san. I'm Haku. The ice user introduced with a respectful bow as she stepped beside Naruto. Seeing the look on Jiraiya's face, Naruto sighed exasperatedly before lifting a foot and lightly kicking the man in the leg to catch his attention. Seal. Fix it. Naruto growled out while pointing at his stomach, the seal holding the kyubi being hidden beneath his dense fur. Glaring at Naruto again, Jiraiya tucked a hand behind him to hide the blue flames that sparked to life on his fingertips. Fine, brat. Ruining my goddamn fun all the time. Jiraiya grumbled before suddenly slamming his hand into Naruto's stomach just as hard as Orochimaru had done just days prior. Gogyu Kaien. Naruto-kun. Haku exclaimed as she knelt beside her boyfriend, helping him back up. The next moment, Naruto bolted forward, driving his head into Jiraiya's stomach hard enough to make the man stumble back before falling on his ass, holding his gut in pain. A little warning would have been nice, asshole. Naruto snarled, glaring at Jiraiya heatedly. Haku, not really sure how to react, just stepped back and let the two of them work it out themselves. That shit fucking hurts, you know. It's called payback, furball. The man shot back just as angrily, hopping back to his feet. Hearing what he'd been called, Naruto waited until their foreheads were touching before suddenly kicking Jiraiya between the legs, making the man tense up before slowly falling over, a pathetic whine of pain coming from him. The fox teen simply snorted victoriously, once more adjusting his scarf to make sure it was still situated over his nose. That was for calling me a furball. Stupid pervert. Naruto growled before starting to walk away, glaring straight ahead of him with his hands stuffed in his pockets. Bowing to Jiraiya once more, Haku ran to catch up to him, idly wondering how the two of them ever managed to not kill each other before now. Sensing Jiraiya coming up behind them rather hastily, Naruto didn't hesitate to grab Haku and Shunshin away, leaving the raging toad sage behind, his yelling attracting the attention of the women he'd just been peeking on and bringing their wrath down on his head. So, he's your godfather? Haku asked curiously from her spot on the couch, lying down between Naruto's legs with her head leaned back against his stomach. After ditching Jiraiya, they'd gone back home. Naruto had wanted to take the next 2 days to relax a little bit before getting back to training. He had 1 month to train for the Chunin exam finals, and as eager as he was for his match against Neji, Naruto still wanted to unwind and de-stress after the hectic week he'd had so far. Yeah, he's always busy traveling, so he couldn't exactly take care of me when I was younger. Naruto mumbled in reply without looking from the pages of the book on basic Fuinjutsu theory in his hand. He was looking into the art of sealing to at least read up on it. He knew mostly just what had been taught in the academy when it came to seals, but not all that much else. We've always been kind of estranged, in a way. You don't like him, do you? Haku asked, still looking at him. Sighing quietly, Naruto closed the book and set it on the coffee table before leaning his head back, his eyes closed. Not really, no. In a way, you could say I resent him for not being there for me back then. If he'd been here, Naruto explained, gesturing towards his whole body. Wouldn't have happened. At the same time, though, I don't. He's always traveling because he's busy keeping tabs on the other villages for the Hokage and other things. What kind of other things? Haku asked, but she didn't get a response. Instead of prying, Haku sat up before changing positions so that she was straddling him. Getting a little too hot since Naruto's air conditioner was still struggling to cool down the apartment, she shed the robe-like top she had on and dropped it next to the couch, leaving her upper body clothed in only her mesh sleeve top. Leaning down just as Naruto glanced at her, Haku immediately kissed him, pressing her body flush against his. She had him for the next 48 hours and she was going to put it to good use. Feeling one of his hands instantly squeeze her butt, Haku pressed closer with a soft moan, running her fingers through the fur on his neck as she slipped her tongue into his mouth. God, she was sorely tempted to give him his birthday present early. XXX. So, any theories about the second tale? Hiruzen inquired as he puffed on his pipe, Jiraiya sitting across from him. The toad sage rubbed his chin thoughtfully for a moment before shaking his head slightly. I couldn't really tell, but I think it might have something to do with the cursed seal Orochimaru put on him. Jiraiya answered, having been one of the people to investigate the lab after it had been raided and Naruto found. Unfortunately, there had been only a couple pages of lab notes that mentioned anything about it and that it had been put on Naruto, causing him to change into the fox boy he was now. It's possible that it could be evolving, I guess. Probably from reacting to the Kyuubi's chakra or something. I don't know exactly what would have caused it, but if its transformative capabilities are still working in the slightest bit, it seems quite possible. If enough of the Kyuubi's chakra gets used, it could trigger the sudden growth of another tail, or it could be something else entirely that we haven't considered yet. I don't know. I can't help thinking that your theory might actually be right, though, Jiraiya. Hiruzen returned, taking another drag from his pipe and exhaling after holding the smoke in for a couple seconds. When he came to me about the Gogyu Fuin, I inspected the seal and it was still fully functional. Nothing was wrong with it apart from what Orochimaru had done. Even if the Kyuubi were somehow involved, I don't believe it's doing it on purpose. He did say that he had been drawing on the Kyuubi's chakra at the time, so your theory would fit if the cursed seal, even in its defunct state, was trying to feed off of the Kyuubi's chakra and ended up forming a second tail. Yeah. Jiraiya sighed out before taking a drink of his sake, having brought a bottle with him to enjoy while talking with his old sensei. So, how's he been doing since I last visited? He still has hard feelings for me, I know that much. Don't take it too personally, Jiraiya. He's still hurting, even after 11 years, and I don't think that pain is going to be going away for years to come. Hiruzen tried reassuring, but he didn't even fully believe his own words. But he's been doing surprisingly well these past few months. His girlfriend has done wonders on his personality and overall mood. Kakashi says his attitude has been surprisingly well-mannered recently, too. Other than that, I don't know what to say, really. He doesn't come by to talk all that much anymore. Quick question, Naruto's girl, Haku. Is she a ninja of Konoha? I didn't see a Hitayate anywhere on her. Jiraiya inquired a little suspiciously, thinking about something. Hiruzen shook his head negatively, causing the gears to start turning in Jiraiya's head. And you said she came to the village with them when they were coming back from Wave Country? I don't mean to start throwing up red flags or causing him any kind of trouble, but it's just a little too strange, if you ask me. She doesn't seem to be hiding anything, but I might look into her anyways. Naruto can hate me, if he wants, but I'm just looking out for him, you know. Honestly, Jiraiya, while I can't disagree that the circumstances around her are indeed worthy of suspicion, I'll have to speak against that. Jiraiya was honestly a little surprised by Hiruzen's argument. If you started digging up old skeletons best left alone and Naruto catches wind of it, he'll never forgive you. He still hasn't let go of how you just abandoned him when he enrolled into the academy. Sensei, I had to go. I didn't want to, but I had to. Jiraiya countered defensively. I couldn't risk not going. My informant had information on the Akatsuki and I needed to make sure I got a hold of it before it got intercepted or my informant caught. I'm sorry, but the Akatsuki take priority. I'm not going to let them hurt that boy. I'd rather die than let them get their hands on him. I don't think he sees it that way, Jiraiya. Hiruzen sighed softly before drinking his own sake. XXX. He. Quit, that tickles. Haku laughed as she squirmed in his arms as they cuddled on the couch, only to keep laughing as Naruto used his tails to keep tickling her side. Laughing louder, Haku squirmed a little bit more before sitting up and glaring down at him heatedly, her cheeks flushed and her frown barely holding. Her resolve broke, however, when she felt the tip of one of his tails brush against her side again, making her giggle again. Pouting, she grabbed a throw pillow before smacking him with it. You are such an ass. But I'm your ass. He retorted with a grin, only to reach around her and cup her butt cheek, squeezing roughly. Moaning as she leaned forward with her hands braced on either side of his head, Haku gently bit down on her bottom lip, pushing her hips back against his hand while trying to press closer to his. And I must say, you have a very nice ass. Jerk. She mumbled before pressing her body flush against his and burying her face against his neck, pouting slightly as she moaned quietly again. Feeling his other hand on her hip slide up under her shirt, Haku arched her back slightly while his hand went to her chest, gently groping her left breast. Biting her lip a little harder, Haku was using every ounce of willpower she had to keep herself from trying to take him right then and there. It was supposed to be his birthday present, damn it, and he was unintentionally making it extremely difficult for her to resist giving it to him early. Keikitsune-kun. A moment later, she smashed her lips against his, forcing her tongue into his mouth hungrily as she started grinding against him. She absolutely refused to give in to her desires just yet, but she was at least going to make sure they both thoroughly enjoyed their evening. Returning the tongue-filled kiss that as enthusiastically, Naruto idly wondered why she seemed so much more excited than usual. He'd barely done anything this time and she was going crazy, if her horny moans. That certainly got your attention. Haku whispered huskily with a seductive smirk on her face, noticing how Naruto's ear twitched slightly as her hot breath washed over it. Having wedged a hand between them, she had started rubbing it against his crotch, effectively making his brain shut down for a minute as she kept doing it, intentionally trying to repay him for all the torment he was putting her through. She had just a little under a month before his birthday and he was making it so much more difficult than it had to be. Using his nearly brain-dead state to her advantage, Haku slipped her tongue back into his mouth, dominating him for all of 20 seconds before his brain kicked back on. Breaking the kiss with a shuddering gasp, Haku's eyes tried rolling back in her head as she moaned louder than before, shivering slightly. Naruto, having returned the favor, didn't realize exactly how much trouble he was in as Haku leaned forward, burying her face against his chest as her back arched. Body spasming slightly as Naruto continued to tease and rub her crotch, Haku moved her hand away from his to better balance herself, struggling to think straight at the moment from the intense pleasure she was feeling. However, after a few seconds, she was tiring of just getting teased. Quickly undoing her pants with one hand, she grabbed Naruto's hand before slipping it into her underwear. Almost instantly, a deep throaty moan escaped her as his hand went back to work, though with a bit of hesitation from the fox team. And Naru. Haku moaned out as she lifted her hips slightly with her hands on either side of his head, giving him better access. Before Naruto could say anything, she passionately kissed him again, moaning into his mouth as their tongues danced. If it weren't for his fingers working their magic on her loins at the moment, Haku was sure she would have given in to her lust and tried bedding him in the next couple minutes. Why did her plans always backfire on her? Moaning even more, Haku felt his other hand still massaging her breast, her nipple currently trapped between his fingers as he continued pleasuring her. Her moans started sounding more like whimpering cries as she felt a familiar tension deep within her core, her cheeks burning hot and her chest heaving with her gasping breaths as they broke apart for air. Wrapping her arms around Naruto's head as tight as possible as her body started spasming, her hips bucking against his hand. And Naruto. I'm HH. Slowly, Naruto's fingers stopped pumping in and out of her, her labored breathing echoing in his ear as she kept his head pressed tight into her neck and shoulder, her body still spasming every couple seconds. When he tried to pull his hand free, his fingers drenched, Haku instantly grabbed him by the wrist, stopping him pulling it out. Hearing the quiet growl in his ear, Naruto felt both a little nervous and even more excited when Haku gently nibbled on his ear a little bit. Getting the not-so-subtle hint, Naruto gradually started pumping his fingers again, a euphoric gasp escaping his girlfriend as she simply held him where he was. Latching onto her neck, he started sucking on the supple flesh of her throat, getting another moan from her as he returned to pleasuring her body. Still struggling to form a single coherent thought, Haku decided she was going to put Naruto to work this time. She'd been having to do it herself a lot of the time in the shower after Naruto would leave to meet with his team in the mornings, but not this time. This time, he had worked her up so much worse than usual and she was going to have him fix it his damn self. Why couldn't it be October 10th already? Chapter 9. The next morning, Haku smiled lovingly as she laid next to Naruto, watching as he slept peacefully. Still topless with him laying on top of her, his head resting on her stomach, Haku gently ran her fingers through the fur on the top of his head and down along his neck. Ear twitching in his sleep, Naruto nuzzled her stomach before settling back down. They had spent the evening and most of the night simply pleasuring one another on the couch and then later on the bed, but Haku had refused to let him relieve himself. When he demanded to know why she wouldn't let him, Haku had teasingly said it was a surprise and that he had to wait a little longer. He had not been happy about it, but she'd managed to convince him to contain himself as much as possible. "I can't wait to let him have his way with me." Haku mused with a slight shiver of excitement while nibbling on her bottom lip, having taken her time with Naruto to indulge in the things she had unknowingly denied herself for so long. One of which was both love and lust, two things she was starting to discover because of Naruto. She was so indescribably happy that they'd met nearly 7 months ago. While the early days of their friendship had been painful and harsh, they had grown stronger from it and endured, unintentionally growing closer from it. By the time they'd reached Konoha back then and officially become a couple, they had already been acting as if they'd been dating for a year or more, excluding any major intimacy. Now, after being together for the past 6 months, Haku had felt it was time for them to take that next step in their relationship. Before, she had been rather nervous about them being intimate, but when her emotions had gotten the best of her when she gave him her heart 6 months ago, those newborn fears disappeared almost as fast as they had formed. She hadn't been afraid of anything happening to their relationship, she hadn't been afraid of Naruto one day falling out of love with her, none of it. She still wasn't. When someone who has nothing receives something precious and important, they'll never let go of it. By the time they became a couple, the only thing that they had that was good in their life was each other. She had no doubt in her mind or in her heart about their future together, with the exception of one of them being killed in a fight, that is, but that was something she refused to think about. Mornin'. Naruto grumbled quietly as he shifted, wrapping his arms around Haku's waist as he gently kissed her stomach, getting a slight giggle out of her as his well-hidden whiskers tickled her for a second. Leaning his head into her hand as she gently scratched behind one of his ears, Naruto gave a jaw-cracking yawn while stretching a little bit, his eyes refusing to open, like usual. "Good morning, sleepy head." Haku greeted softly before he moved further up her body, kissing her lovingly. Eyes closing with contentment as he laid back down on top of her, Haku couldn't help smiling coyly with a soft laugh as Naruto's whiskers tickled her nose a little bit, but quickly captured his lips in another kiss, wrapping her arms around his neck to keep him from going anywhere as she slowly broke the kiss after a few seconds. "Did you sleep well?" "I'd have slept better if you would have just let me dash," Naruto tried complaining, only for Haku to silence him with another kiss, this time slipping her tongue into his mouth. Breaking the kiss with a soft gasp a second later, Haku fisted a hand in the fur on the back of Naruto's head as he firmly pressed his body against hers, her legs instinctively trying to wrap around him to hold him in place, only managing to pin his hips under her knees. Nibbling on her ear-lobe like he did every morning, Naruto made sure it was a little more sensual feeling as he quietly growled, gently grinding against her for a moment, making Haku moan heartily. "Keep pushing me and I'll push back, Usagi-chan." Haku shivered noticeably as she heard her newfound pet name, another coy smile tugging at her lips as she started nibbling on Naruto's ear in return, playfully growling at him. Fuck it, she was done. She gave up. She didn't know what she was getting into when she thought she'd be able to hold out until his birthday. She didn't know how she was going to hold out for the next 5 minutes, let alone the next 3 weeks. That was when her eyes flew open and started rolling back in her head, sucking in a desperate breath as her back arched. Having clamped his jaws over her shoulder at the base of her neck, Naruto bit down, but not enough to break her skin or cause her any unwanted pain. Just enough to further excite her. Judging from how she was squeezing his head against her shoulder and wrapped her legs around his waist fully, he doubted she wanted him to stop any time soon. Slowly releasing her shoulder, Naruto gave her a living kiss before leaning down and lightly suckling one of her nipples, making her shudder with a whimpering moan. Feeling especially cruel, Naruto slowly rocked his hips against hers for a moment to really get her worked up into a frenzy before suddenly getting off of her, climbing out of bed with a cheeky grin. "Wano. Get your fuzzy butt back over here and love me, damn it." Haku protested, trying to snag him by the pants before he got out of reach, but she missed. Sitting up, Haku immediately groaned softly, only to curl up as she flopped back down on the bed on her other side. She was too horny to even chase after him. Whining pathetically, Haku buried her face in a pillow, still shivering with need. "You're so mean. So says the one that started this war." Naruto laughed as he grabbed a towel and a change of fresh clothes, deciding to take a quick shower to clean up properly after their fun last night. Glaring at the bathroom door with tears in her eyes and burning crimson cheeks, Haku was sorely tempted to just chase after him and do him in the shower, only to hear the door lock click. Whining again, Haku bit down on the pillow trapped in her arms, still glaring at the bathroom door. He was going to pay for that. XXX. Finally deciding to stick around for a bit, huh? Naruto remarked spitefully as he spun a kunai on the tip of his finger, not even bothering to look at Jiraiya. Scattered all around him were dozens of targets set up in the branches, hung up on tree trunks, sticking out of the ground, and everywhere else in between. Jiraiya was honestly a little impressed as he watched the boy train, having tried to stay hidden while he watched at first, but that was before a half-dozen throwing knives came within inches of hitting him. He'd seen shinobi that were exceptionally skilled with kunai, but they had been few and far between. At least, those with natural talent with them like Naruto. Each target had been nailed in the dead center, the blades clustered around the bullseye on each target, regardless of its positioning. He would throw one at a target to the lower right before going for one at the upper left before throwing another at one that was behind him. Naruto moved continuously, not once stopping to do anything more than glance at a target before letting his kunai fly. What impressed him was the speed with which he moved, throwing an average of 5 in a single second. His skill with a kunai was impressive for even some jounin, let alone a genin. Sadly, once he'd been spotted, Naruto had stopped. "I thought you would have just run off again after yesterday." Naruto growled before snagging his kunai, channeling a bit of wind chakra into it before throwing it, the blade punching through the target, the tree it was mounted to, and burying itself up to the ring in the tree behind it. Jiraiya winced at the boy's words. Last time they'd spoken, he had given Naruto his bracers and greaves as a present for both enrolling into the academy and as a sort of parting gift. Once Naruto had learned that Jiraiya would be leaving, the boy had taken it exceptionally hard. Hiruzen was right, he really hadn't forgiven him for it. After a few seconds of silence, Naruto growled while glaring at Jiraiya over his shoulder. "What do you want?" "Look, Naruto, I know I've got a lot of work ahead of me, but I want to at least try making things up to you." Jiraiya sighed when Naruto's eye only narrowed. After everything that had happened to the boy, he honestly couldn't blame him for not being so trusting or forgiving, but still, didn't it account for something that he was trying now? "Let me train you, just until the finals. After that, you don't ever have to speak to me again if you don't want to, all I'm asking for is a second chance." "You really don't get it, do you?" Naruto asked rhetorically and coldly as he looked forward again, keeping his back to the man. "Your first chance was wasted when you left me alone for the first 7 years of my life. Your second chance was wasted when you ditched me 9 years ago." "Naruto, I..." Jiraiya cut himself off, scratching the back of his head. He'd been hoping for a less hostile reunion, but it was obvious that it wasn't going to happen. Still, he had thought ahead, figuring he might get such a reaction from Naruto. Setting down a sealing scroll, Jiraiya simply turned on his heel and started walking away, not even bothering to hide just how dejected he was. Some training tips and techniques. Pick them out myself. Use them, don't use them. It doesn't matter anymore. Naruto didn't say anything or move as Jiraiya left, his jaw tensed as he simply stood there. Shaking. He had a lot of issues with his supposed godfather. He'd been a basket case when they pulled him out of that lab. Hell, he was no different than a rabid, feral animal. He had bitten 5 different ANBU bad enough that they needed numerous stitches, mauled another, and would have done worse if they hadn't knocked him out and kept him tranquilized throughout the entire trip back to Konoha. It took him a long time to recover from it. He'd met Jiraiya a week after he was brought to Konoha and found out that he was his godfather. For a few months, Naruto was recovering rather quickly with the man's help. He'd even taught Naruto a few things to help him later on in the future whenever he would eventually join the academy. When that day came, Naruto had been on the verge of returning to at least a shadow of his former happy-go-lucky self, and then Jiraiya dropped the bomb on his head. He relapsed entirely within days of the man leaving. It had been a serious struggle for him, trying to piece his sanity back together. It was the main reason why he resented Jiraiya so much. Even now, after so many years since he had been cursed by Orochimaru, Naruto still suffered from the wounds inflicted upon him, both physical and mental. Gritting his teeth, Naruto closed his eyes as a couple tears fell from his eyes. Not even caring about his kunai anymore, Naruto blurred with speed, disappearing from the clearing. He needed to go for a run. Back in the clearing, the scroll Jiraiya had set down on the ground for him was missing, snagged and put away as he took off. XXX. It's already past midnight. Haku thought worriedly, sitting on the couch with her knees drawn up to her chest and arms wrapped around her legs. He still hasn't come back, what's taking him so long? It wasn't like him to stay out so late. Maybe back before they met, from what Sakura told her, but not anymore. For the past 6 months, he had never been back any later than sundown. She was worried. No. She was scared. After not having him around for so long, Haku could feel her fears coming back, the ones she had been battling after Zabuza's death. What if something happened to him? Shaking her head furiously, Haku forced those thoughts out of her head. She couldn't let herself get worked up like that. He was probably just training extra hard. That's when she heard the door unlock, her eyes immediately jumping to the wooden portal as it opened. Naruto used the back of his hand to wipe away the touch of blood on his lip as he closed the door, shuffling to the bedroom as he just shed his bracers, greaves, and equipment along the way, dropping it all on the floor carelessly. Hesitantly standing up, Haku watched him with extreme worry. He had never done that since she met him. His fur was visibly full of dirt and matted with blood in some spots, his mesh shirt ripped to shreds that barely hung off his body. His kunai harness was still in tatters, hanging up on the wall where he'd left it, but even his scarf, it was almost too ripped and torn to be repaired, the length of scarlet fabric holding itself together by threads as he dropped it on the floor just outside of the room. A moment later, Haku nearly ran to the bedroom to find Naruto just sitting on the floor in front of the bed, sitting not unlike she had been just minutes ago. Walking over to him and kneeling, Haku hesitantly reached out to him before setting a hand on his head as she sat down. Pulling him into her arms without a fight, Haku simply held him for a few minutes before she felt him start to shake, his arms weakly encircling her as he silently cried into her chest. Closing her eyes, she did the only thing she could think of at the moment. Shoo. It's okay, baby. I'm right here. Haku whispered comfortingly, running a hand over his head and down his neck. It'll be okay. I'm right here, I've got you. Haku was silent as she stared down at Naruto as he slept, his head resting in her lap. It had taken an hour before he finally stopped crying. After that, she made him get in the tub before bathing the near catatonic fox teen herself. Afterwards, she had tended to his injuries, finding dozens of bite marks and ragged cuts and scratches all over his body. He almost looked like he had gotten in a fight with a pack of wolves. His pants were in tatters, the wrappings he usually wore on his lower legs were in a similar condition, armor pieces heavily scuffed and scratched up. Just what happened to you, Naruto-kun? She was worried for him. Extremely so. She'd never seen him act so dead before. And then his condition when he got home, what was he doing all night? Lip quivering slightly as her worry became too much to contain, Haku slipped his head off her lap before curling up next to him, gently cradling his head against her neck and shoulder as she held him close, a few tears falling from her eyes. She could only hope that he would at least talk to her when he woke up. I take it Naruto wasn't very happy to see you. Kakashi mumbled as he sat next to Jiraiya at the bar, ordering some sake for himself. It was clear that Jiraiya had been there for a good minute, a handful of empty sake bottles set next to him and another sitting in front of him. Do you want me to talk to him about it? No. He was right, Kakashi. The white-haired man mumbled before taking another drink of sake, draining the dish instantly. Sighing heavily, he refilled it after a few seconds. I was one of the first people to hear about the aftermath of the Kyuubi attack thanks to the toads, and I didn't come back. I was too upset over Minato's and Kushina's deaths. I ran away, thinking everything would be okay for him. I heard about how horrible his childhood was and I still didn't come back. I didn't come back until the damage was already done, and I still didn't stay very long, seeing too much of his parents in the boy. He was right. I don't deserve another chance. You know as well as I do that he says some pretty harsh things he doesn't really mean when he's upset. Kakashi tried reassuring as he sipped at his drink, but Jiraiya just scoffed before downing another dish of sake. You've got to look at it from his perspective, Jiraiya. He had been nothing more than a beast when we found him. I've got the scars to prove it. He nearly took one of my fingers off. The only reason he even started getting better was because of you. Yeah, you left and it made things worse, but he's done good on his own recently. He's got Haku looking out for him now and she's done a terrific job with him. Did you know that before she came into the picture, Naruto spent more nights in the woods than he did in his own bed? He rarely ever went home. He's just facing his issues right now after seeing you again. You two just need to talk things out and work towards getting past this. Easier said than done. Jiraiya mumbled around the dish in his hand before downing its contents. Pouring the last of his sake into the cup, Jiraiya finished it off before standing from the bar stool, wobbling slightly in his drunken stupor. That boy wants nothing to do with me anymore, and I can't blame him for it. Kakashi sighed as he stared down at his sake dish, staring at his reflection in the golden liquid. Outside, Jiraiya stared, making his way back to the hotel room he'd rented while he was in Konoha, stumbling slightly every few steps. However, even in his drunken state, he still clearly heard the quiet sound of someone landing behind him, prompting him to turn to find someone he had not expected to see. Standing there, fully geared, was Haku. What do you want? Come to yell at me, too? Jiraiya mumbled thoughtlessly before turning around fully. Haku was quiet for a few moments as she shook her head. I wanted to talk to you. About Naruto. Haku answered, getting a sigh from Jiraiya as he pinched the bridge of his nose. He's a mess right now. What time is it? He mumbled to himself as he fumbled around in his pockets before pulling out a watch, nearly 4 in the morning. Heaving another heavy sigh, he rubbed the back of his neck. What happened? That's just it. I don't know. He's usually back by sundown every day at the latest, but today, he didn't come back until just after midnight. He was dirty and scratched up as if he got in a fight with an animal or something. Haku explained, staring down at the ground as she started losing her composure a little bit out of concern for her boyfriend. I had to clean him up myself after he stopped crying and put him in bed. He hasn't spoken a word since he came back. What happened, Jiraiya? Why is he like that? Shit. Sounds like he's starting to relapse again. Jiraiya hissed under his breath before leaning back against a nearby wall, palming his face as he tried thinking of something. His words, however, confused and worried Haku. Back when we rescued him from one of Orochimaru's labs, he was feral, to put it lightly. He would claw and bite anyone that got near him, unable to identify friend from foe. I helped him come back to us after a little while, but I had to leave the village again because of my work. He didn't take it well. He relapsed in only a few days and it took a long time for him to calm back down, but it changed him. From what I hear, you've made a lot of progress with him these past few months. Yeah, but he's never acted like this before. Haku whispered as her eyes watered, but she dried her tears before looking back at Jiraiya. I don't know what to do. He still live in that tiny apartment next to the park. Jiraiya asked, getting a nod from Haku. Closing his eyes, he weighed the pros and cons of his options for a moment before sighing with mild exasperation. All right. Leave everything to me. I'll see what I can do, but I can guarantee he won't like any of it. What do you mean? Haku asked, but she didn't get an answer as the man shined away. Nervously chewing on her bottom lip, Haku stood there for a few seconds before jumping back to the rooftops, heading back in the direction of the apartment. When she got there, however, she noticed how something felt off. Immediately going to the bedroom, Haku froze in the doorway. Naruto was gone. Finally noticing the small note tacked to the door, she pulled it off and read it. He'll be okay. I promise. I'll be in touch. Jiraiya. Crushing the note in her hand as she wrapped her arms around herself, Haku leaned against the doorway before slowly sinking down to the floor, drawing her knees up to her chest. It wasn't long before she ended up crying herself to sleep where she was at. God damn it. Jiraiya snarled as he held his hand, a bloody bite mark covering half of it where Naruto had bit him. He'd taken the boy to a secluded shack deep in the forest atop the Hokage mountain. The same place he had taken Naruto back when he was still a kid. The entire place was warded off with seals, keeping everyone out and trapping them both inside of the barrier. It kept people from messing with them and it kept Naruto from trying to run away. Currently snarling and growling at him with bared fangs was none other than Naruto, wearing only his pants and tied up in a chair with a chakra suppression seal situated between his shoulder blades. Now that the boy had skills on par with a veteran Chunin, Jiraiya couldn't take as many risks with the boy. Whether you like it or not, boy, I'm not going to let you do this to yourself again. I couldn't care less about how you feel about me, but I'm not going to let you put that girl through hell just because you can't handle your shit anymore. Even in his rabid state, Naruto seemed to understand what he said for a moment, his eyes widening slightly as he calmed down for a second. Glaring off to the side, Naruto seemed to stop struggling to get free, but he hadn't stopped growling. Sighing heavily, Jiraiya pulled out a first aid kit to tend to his hand. Even as drunk as he was, the boy had some sharp teeth, the alcohol doing little to numb the pain of the bite. At least he'd stopped fighting him for the moment. Still, he wondered why Naruto hadn't behaved so rabidly when he was with Haku. The moment he'd gotten to the shack, Naruto had woken up and immediately tried to maul him. Just so you know, I'm not doing this for me or for you or anything like that. Jiraiya continued as he sat down in a chair across from the feral fox team. Sighing, he leaned forward, bracing his elbows on his knees as he stared at the floor. I'm doing this for her. She's worried about you, kid. She's scared. Naruto didn't speak, but the way he started snarling slightly again as he continued to glare off to the side, Jiraiya knew his words were starting to reach him. Seeing a tear form in Naruto's eye as he continued glaring at the side wall, the past his prime shinobi smiled sadly. The boy really loved that girl, didn't he? You've got 1 week to pull yourself back together. This isn't the first time you've had to go through this shit, so it shouldn't be too hard for you. Jiraiya mumbled before grabbing one of the few bottles of sake he usually had stashed away in a scroll for emergency use. Taking a drink from it, Jiraiya ran a hand over his head, knowing it was going to be a long week. Chapter 10. 2 weeks. She'd been alone for 2 weeks and it had been hell for her. She'd been having nightmares almost every night, leaving her sleep deprived with dark bags starting to form under her eyes. Smiling weakly as Ren hopped up onto the couch where she was laying down, Haku gently pet the feline. She hadn't realized just how heavily she truly relied on Naruto for emotional support. Just being near him was more than enough for her to stay strong, to scare away her nightmares, but the moment he disappeared from her side, she became a wreck. The day after Jiraiya took Naruto, she had sent Sakura a message saying that she wouldn't be able to continue training her for a little while, but didn't specify why. Her depression and exhaustion kept her confined to the apartment for the most part, only going out to do any light shopping she needed to do with the money Naruto kept at home for her to use, but that was about it. Ugh. Pull yourself together. Haku suddenly groaned as she forced herself to sit up, rubbing her face vigorously. Wearing a pair of black shorts and a light gray tank top because of the summer heat, Haku stood up and stretched with a groan before heading to the bedroom, grabbing her hairbrush and running it through her raven locks to tidy it up. Pulling it back into a ponytail afterwards with a black hair tie she kept around her wrist, she decided to at least be a little productive as she gathered up the laundry before hauling the basket to the front door. Moving it outside, Haku made sure to arm the trap and lock the door before heading down to the apartment building's ground floor where the communal laundry room was located. Once she had everything in the washing machine, she sat down in a nearby chair, being the laundry room's only occupant. She needed something to keep her busy. Sure, she could train Sakura, but there wasn't much left for her to teach the girl. For the most part, she could just give the girl scrolls on everything else she needed to learn about herbology and anatomy. At the same time, though, she didn't want to become a regular ninja of Konoha and go out on missions, not unless she was teamed up with Naruto on them. She had started falling apart at the seams after just the first few days she'd spent away from him. There's no way she'd be able to handle going out on any missions outside of the village for any more than a day or two if Naruto wasn't right next to her. God, I'm so pathetic right now. Haku thought depressively with a sigh, only for a thought to occur to her. Or rather, she remembered something Naruto had said a while back. Something about becoming a teacher. Thinking it over, she could see the merits in it. She already loved kids, so working as even an assistant teacher at the academy would be nice. So long as the Hokage would allow her to join the village's ranks, she would be able to freely access the shinobi library, giving her a chance to learn more techniques and branch out with what she could do. It would be a decent and steady income, too. She'd always felt a little self-conscious about Naruto having to pay for everything all the time. He didn't really mind it, but it still bugged her a little. She was used to pulling her own weight back when she traveled with Sabuza. The only reason she had been so against it before was because she was still trying to readjust to living in a stable environment when Naruto started suggesting it. Granted, he had only first started bringing it up a handful of weeks ago, but still, she wasn't even sure the Hokage would let her. Naruto had said he was a nice person and looked up to the man like a grandfather, the one he had told her about in passing back in Wave Country. She was just a little scared of being rejected. As happy as she was, the past 2 weeks had snapped her out of the daze she'd been in. She was still in a fragile state, and it was getting to her. Not that it was getting worse, but that she wanted to do something about it. Maybe it wouldn't be such a bad idea, after all. Haku mused with a slight smile as she heard the alarm from the washing machine timing out. Getting up and transferring everything over to the dryer, Haku set the timer and started it up after depositing a coin in the slot. Leaning back against the washer she had just been using, Haku blankly stared at the far wall and thought, letting herself daydream a little about the future. Someday, she hoped they could move into an actual house with a little bit of property and, maybe, start a family with her beloved Kitsune-kun. It was still a distant dream, a rather cliché one, at that, but it was still a dream. Smiling tenderly at the thought, Haku shook her head a little bit. At least she was cheering back up, and all by herself, too. Sitting back down in the chair since she had an hour to go before the laundry was done, Haku glanced at the magazines on the table next to her. They were all civilian ones, but she grabbed one and started flipping through it idly, just looking for something to kill time. Once it had finally finished, Haku unloaded everything back into the laundry basket she'd brought with her before hauling it back up to the apartment, huffing slightly as she reached the door. Disarming and unlocking the door, she went back inside and locked the door behind her before heading to the room to start folding everything and putting it all away. Just as she walked into the bedroom, though. "Naruto!" she exclaimed, dropping the basket as she rushed forward to wrap her arms around him, burying her face against his chest. Smiling slightly, he slowly wrapped his arms around her in return, lightly kissing the top of her head. "I'm sorry for upsetting you, Haku," he whispered softly, making her shake her head as best as she could, drying her few tears with his furry chest. It's okay. I'm just happy you're back. She mumbled, holding on to him for dear life. Feeling him pick her up, Haku blushed slightly while clinging to him, but the journey was short-lived as he sat down on the bed with her in his arms. "So, are you okay now?" "Yeah, I'm okay now." He mumbled quietly as he buried his nose in her hair, breathing in her scent as he closed his eyes. Pulling back slightly, he tilted her head up to look at him, having been intending to kiss her, only to notice the bags under her eyes. Frowning slightly, he gently brushed a thumb across her cheek. "You've been having nightmares again, haven't you?" "Emichim." She hummed out, looking away slightly, almost ashamed of it. She knew it wasn't something that could be controlled, but she still didn't like making him worry. Feeling him kiss her forehead, Haku let her eyes close before leaning back against him. "It's okay, though, I've been doing some thinking while you were gone." "Oh?" he intoned curiously, looking down at her. Smiling a little more, she nodded her head against his chest and neck without looking up at him. "I decided to do what you suggested a while back," she answered before finally looking up at him. "I'm going to try to become a teacher." "Really now? What happened to being so against it?" Naruto teased lightly, getting an indignant blush and pout from the girl as she buried her face back against his chest. Despite his teasing, Haku was just happy to have her Kitsune-kun back in her arms. Later that night, Naruto stared down at Haku as she slumbered, smiling softly as he gently brushed a few hairs out of her face. Slowly slipping out of bed without disturbing her, Naruto pulled the covers over her fully before walking to the kitchen and grabbing a bottle of water from the fridge before sitting on the couch. He had skipped over the details of what had gone on while he was away with Jiraiya, but he had made sure to reassure her that he was okay. He was glad she didn't care about the details, though, one of which was the reason why he was having trouble sleeping even though it was almost 1 in the morning. Cracking the bottle open and taking a sip, Naruto sighed while running a hand over his head before putting the bottle on the coffee table. Situating himself in the lotus position on the couch, Naruto sat his hands in his lap while closing his eyes and concentrating. It had taken him a couple days to get the hang of it, but Jiraiya had managed to help him contact the Kyuubi during the second week. It had been necessary since they were wanting to find out the cause for the chakra spikes that had strangely stopped after his second tail formed. After a few minutes, Naruto opened his eyes once more to find himself in a sewer-like structure, the mental representation of the seal containing the Kyuubi no Kitsune. His mindscape, as it were. It had been a rather frustrating fiasco trying to talk with the fox about the chakra spikes. As it turned out, it was a result of the snake fuck's malfunctioning seal, but it wasn't anything bad, surprisingly. When it was first placed, Orochimaru hadn't accounted for the sheer potency of the Kyuubi's chakra, which warped the already faulty seal. Thus, his physical appearance. Even the splinter of Orochimaru's being was destroyed by the Kyuubi's power the moment the seal was placed on him. As for the chakra spikes, it was because of the seal's original faults. While other bearers of a cursed seal could call upon it at will, his would have activated randomly under times of high stress tied in with hard fighting. Thus, the chakra spikes whenever he was fighting someone that he had subconsciously labeled as being stronger than him, whether it was just because of someone's rank or because of a slight intimidation from some kind of weapon they had. Whenever the cursed seal would have originally been triggered, it would simply pull out bits and pieces of the Kyuubi's chakra to boost him, acting almost like an automatic offensive enhancement, kind of like a technique being used. Kiba's Shikaku technique was one of the first to come to his mind when he learned about it. As for his second tail, however, that was also a side effect of the malfunctioning cursed seal. Apparently, whatever it was that Orochimaru used to create it, it had strange transformative powers that acted as the cursed seal's basis. Whatever its original purpose was, neither of them could tell, but from what the Kyuubi had been able to sense about it, the seal was evolving, in a way. Not that it was getting stronger or anything, but more like an immune system getting stronger against certain things. It was essentially trying to adapt Naruto's body to the Kyuubi's chakra, allowing him to handle more of its chakra at once. The number of his tails didn't equate to the same as the Kyuubi's, but it was enough that he could handle more without losing himself to its dark influence so easily. It had stumped Naruto and Jiraiya both when he'd relayed the information to the man. Because of Orochimaru's interference, Naruto now had something that allowed him better control over the Kyuubi's chakra in limited amounts. And it was slowly getting stronger the more of said Bijuu's chakra he used. It was a surprising boon. "What do you want this time, boy?" The massive fox inquired irritably from within the shadowy confines of its prison while Naruto walked into the giant chamber. "I just wanted to talk for a little bit. That's all," Naruto remarked as he sat down not too far from the cage's towering gates, staring up at the giant nine-tailed fox. "I can't sleep and thought you might have something to talk about." "I have nothing to say to you. Leave me alone." The Kyuubi growled out at him before forcefully ejecting him from their shared realm. Opening his eyes and finding himself back on the couch, Naruto couldn't help sighing with a slight grimace. Was that what it felt like when he acted like an ass to everyone else? "Glad to know that I've been acting like a total jackass half the time." He grumbled quietly before taking a drink of his water, letting his legs stretch back out as he sat there. Letting his mind wander aimlessly, he eventually started thinking about what Haku had told him shortly after he got back to the apartment. She was going to try to become a teacher. That meant he was going to have to introduce her to the Sandaime to see if she'd even be able to join. As friendly and kind-hearted as he was, Naruto knew that the old man would always put the village first. He would just have to use that to his advantage if the Sandaime tried arguing the matter. He'll wait until after the Chunin exams to ask, seeing as the old man was probably busy with everything already. Walking back to the room, Naruto set his water bottle on the nightstand before crawling back into bed, attempting once more to get some rest. Almost instantly, Haku sensed his body heat in her sleep and sluggishly cuddled up against him once more, burying her face against the side of his chest with an arm draped over his stomach and a leg tossed over his. Smiling warmly, Naruto held her close and closed his eyes, simply waiting for sleep to claim him. Checking the calendar, Haku smirked slightly. October 4th. Just under a week before she could give him his birthday present. Luckily, his birthday fell on a day that was exactly 1 week before the finals were to take place. Naruto had been back for all of maybe 24 hours and she was already focused back on his birthday. Of course, she was still worried about him, but he had told her what was wrong a little while after he got back. As it turned out, Naruto was a little more broken than she had originally assumed. She couldn't imagine what he had gone through back then. At the same time, she was proud of him. Despite all of the horrors he had been forced to endure, he was still able to hold himself together most of the time and get through it all. Even if he had needed to get put through mental rehabilitation by Jiraiya. Naruto didn't tell her much about what had happened, but she wasn't worried about it. If it was important, he would tell her. She constantly worried over him enough as it was. She didn't need more things weighing down on her mind when it came to him. Besides, as far as she could tell, most of it had simply been Jiraiya keeping Naruto contained while trying to get the boy to focus back on reality again. During the solid year of near-total isolation he'd spent in that lab, Naruto had apparently gotten in touch with his animal instincts, which caused him to go feral. Now, it was something that would never truly go away. Thinking of her boyfriend, Haku frowned slightly as she remembered that he was going back out to train with Jiraiya some more. She didn't have anything against the man, but she just worried that they didn't try to kill each other. Still, she was glad to know that Naruto was at least giving the man another chance to redeem himself. Shaking her head to clear it, Haku went back to getting breakfast ready. It wouldn't be much longer before he woke up, after all. Jiraiya stood off to the side as he watched Naruto and his clone spar atop the small lake surface, the multiple twin-tailed fox teens using taijutsu only. The only key difference that set it apart from how the boy normally sparred with his clones was one simple thing: they all had red eyes, a clear sign of the Kyuubi's chakra being used. After Naruto's first visit with the Kyuubi, Jiraiya had once again offered to teach him for the rest of the month until the Chunin exam finals. For the most part, he wanted to make sure Naruto could control it properly in a fight. So far, He seemed adept at tapping into the Kyuubi's chakra, but couldn't really draw on much more than what the chakra spikes he told him about would provide, but it was more sustained now. It's still something. Jiraiya mused as he watched Naruto and his clones trading blows, the original battling all 14 of his copies by himself. Using Kyuubi's chakra, Naruto moved faster than most Chunin, almost faster than most rookie Jounin, but not in land speed. The boy was already fast as hell even without the Kyuubi's chakra enhancing it. No, he meant the speed of his strikes. The Toad Sage couldn't help smiling slightly as he watched Naruto dance around punches and kicks before countering while the clones were left wide open from their attempts to hit him. What made it challenging was the fact that his clones were just as fast as him. From what Kakashi had told him, Naruto fought by instinct, letting his body dictate where to go or what to do in a fight. He had been taught only a handful of things about taijutsu and had damn near created an entirely unique fighting style from it. While not an actual fighting style, it had the potential to be made into one with enough proper refinement. Because of his unique physiology, Naruto had greater flexibility than most people. His twin tails granted him better balance and more control over his center of gravity, and with his heightened senses, he could react to things far quicker than anyone else. The only ones in Konoha that beat the boy in terms of sensory awareness were those of Hyuga blood due to their Byakugan. His opponent in the Chunin exam finals just so happened to not only be a Hyuga, but a prodigy of the Branch House family. From what he'd been told, he was also quite brutal in a fight. He'll have to focus Naruto's training to better deal with the Hyuga clan's gentle fist fighting style, but as quick as Naruto's reflexes were, Jiraiya didn't think he'd have too hard of a time. The real issue was the presence of a second Jinchuriki in the exams, Sabaka no Gaara. The boy was capable of controlling sand with absolute ease because of the Ichibi no Tanuki's spirit sealed inside of him. That and he had an automatic defense that would be incredibly difficult for Naruto to deal with. He was a speed fighter, not a heavy hitter. Given enough time and proper training, he could be one day, but as he was now, he wasn't strong enough to deal with him. That would have to be rectified, just in case. Sighing heavily, Jiraiya rubbed the back of his head as he closed his eyes and bowed his head. He had so much to teach the boy in such a small time frame. Thankfully, he was a quick learner, but Jiraiya didn't think he'd be able to get it all taken care of in only 2 weeks. Just under that, actually. He had faith in the boy, though. He was a tenacious little shit just like his parents, after all. Hey, kid. That's enough for now. Come here. Jiraiya called out to Naruto, distracting him just long enough for a clone to get in a cheap shot. Almost instantly, Naruto rounded on them all in anger, using his claws to maul each and every clone around him, his feral side showing as he attacked them like a rabid beast. Watching with a flat stare, Jiraiya couldn't help sighing. That was one thing they needed to work on, his temper while under the influence of the Kyuubi's chakra. That, however, could wait until another time. A minute later, Naruto walked over to him while scratching under his chin, his eyes still red from sustained use of the Kyuubi's chakra, a passive training technique to find out how long he could hold it. So far, he'd been using it for the past hour without much of an issue apart from a slight drop in his chakra control. I think it's about time I taught you something that should prove rather useful to you. You know what a summoning contract is, right? Yeah, why? Naruto drawled out and then asked slowly, a flat look of suspicion on his face. You want me to sign the Toad contract, don't you? Stupid brat. Always ruining my fun. Jiraiya snapped indignantly, fuming not unlike how a child would. How the hell did you dash? You're the Toad Sage, you lek. Naruto interrupted, simply staring at Jiraiya with mild annoyance. I highly doubt you've got another summoning contract stashed in your back pocket. You don't know that. Jiraiya argued, crossing his arms over his chest while glaring off to the side, still pouting. Do you? Naruto asked, immediately calling the man's bluff. No. The perverted old man muttered, his pout only worsening. That's what I thought. Naruto sighed quietly, closing his eyes as he ran a hand over his head, smoothing out some of his fur. XXX. Hey, baby. How was training? Haku greeted with a smile as she walked up to him, giving him a tender kiss on the lips as he stripped out of his armor and other equipment. Naruto, looking a little worse for wear, gained a half-lidded look that was a cross between annoyance and an exhausted pout. Faye. He scoffed, getting a giggle from her as he shuffled over to the couch, flopping face down on it as he finally started feeling the physically draining side effects of using the Kyuubi's chakra for so long. This time, Haku laughed a little louder at him, getting a disapproving growl from Naruto, who didn't even bother moving in the slightest. Ah, did you have a long day? Haku teased mockingly as she walked over and patted his head, sounding as if she were making fun of a child. Still growling, Naruto retaliated with a low blow, not even bothering to look as he reached up and grabbed the inside of her thigh near her crotch. Squeaking quietly, Haku nearly fell over on top of him as her legs near gave out from under her, but she managed to catch herself. Cheeks burning red, Haku bit down on her bottom lip to suppress a moan as he squeezed her inner thigh, the fox teen intentionally tormenting her to get back at her. Why you jerk? Then quit making fun of me. Naruto mumbled through the couch cushion as he let her go, getting a huff from the long dark-haired young woman as she glared at the back of his head. Wanting to make a nuisance of herself, she laid down on top of him, getting another drawn-out growl of disapproval from Naruto. Get off. I can't do that until you stop ignoring me. Haku whispered teasingly in his ear, his growl only getting louder. Only this time, it wasn't quite so annoyed. Grinning cheekily, Haku hastily climbed off of him before running for the bedroom, laughing as Naruto tried grabbing her again before she could get too far from him. Sitting up, Naruto groaned as he stretched a little, his back popping as he did. Standing up, Naruto started walking to the bedroom while tugging his mesh shirt and gloves off. XXX. Nearly a week later, Haku couldn't help giggling as Naruto lightly kissed her stomach, tickling her with his whiskers as he held her by her hips, both laying on their sides on the bed. Barren of clothes with the exception of her dark blue booty shorts, Haku bit her bottom lip slightly as one of his hands shifted lower, gripping her thigh just below her but as he leaned his head up slightly to teasingly kiss her nipple. Cheeks reddening slightly, Haku encouragingly ran her fingers through the fur on his neck,